welcome to the Wet Streams podcast. I'm Jose, your host, and this is Brad. And so far, we've talked about a bunch of different topics, but today, the topic that we're talking about is porn. So this is something that we deal with all our people, and it's something that's a heavily debated topic, and we can talk about that a little bit. But whether it's an addiction or not, the two camps that talk about it, and that's maybe where we'll start. But we're gonna get into that and our thoughts about porn versus porn sex versus real sex, and some of the myths or some of the things that some of our clients think about when they think about porn. We're gonna get into porn today and probably another episode, but we'll start a little bit in there today. Let's start with the controversy surrounding porn. Maybe we could start talking about there. I think you have a pretty good handle about the two camps of porn.
So technically, porn is not recognized in our manual as an addiction.
Yeah.
And it probably will not be in our lifetimes. Even though clients come to us and say they have a porn addiction, we don't say no, you don't, 'cause
right?
It's not a real addiction. But it's not an official diagnosis, and so there are several addictions that are recognized: alcohol and drugs and gambling and so forth. But pornography addiction is not. We're not going to get reimbursed by insurance companies for diagnosing somebody with a porn addiction. Although that does not stop the fact that there are many, many people who come to us who consume pornography, and it's having a significant impairment in their life, right? So it interferes with the relationships. People have lost jobs. And so it causes problems, right? Especially compulsive, habitual, like ongoing kind of consumption of porn. And so there are some therapists who believe that it is an addiction. There are lots of therapists who believe that it's not an addiction. And so those two camps of therapists fight sometimes. And so, which to me is detrimental to helping clients. If we can't agree on whether it's an addiction or not, what hope is there for people that are struggling with this? And so my attitude, and I think your attitude too, is that if a client comes to us and says this is a problem, then it's a problem, right? I don't care what you call it. If the client says that it's a problem, then it's a problem. And we can approach it from the standpoint of how do you get rid of something that's a problem in your life,
right?
So that's kind of the controversy around porn. In larger society, there's a huge controversy around pornography itself, like what is pornography and what's not pornography, and how do you define that? Like Michelangelo's David, the statue, after hundreds of years, now the state of Florida is saying that that's pornography. And so, however, the definition that Congress came up with 50 years ago was that pornography is in the intent of the person who created it. So was the material created for sexual excitement? And if it was, then that's pornography. Right? If it includes naked bodies doing stuff with the person who created it, the intent was for sexual excitement, then that's pornography.
So that's interesting, and that's we're gonna talk about the stuff. But did they include? I've heard of that definition, but is it specifically naked bodies?
Right. So yes. So
okay.
Like if a parent takes a picture of their kid in the bathtub, and they don't have any clothes on, that's not pornography because that parent was not creating that picture with the purpose of sexual excitement.
Right.
It's I can't remember how they word the naked body thing, but that it's humans with their genitals
Right.
exposed, with the purpose of sexual
Sexual
excitement.
excitement. Right. Okay. I mean, because the point I was gonna make was there's plenty of videos, non-naked bodies, of the intent being sexual arousal. You didn't say sexual arousal, but by the person, and then would that be considered pornography? But maybe that's another conversation for a different day. But
Right.
because that then blurs the line of pornography. But anyways, going back to the initial kind of controversy, like the thought that I had was like you can't or people that come into our office, like for them it feels like an addiction, porn addiction, or it feels like it's out of control or problematic or compulsory, whatever word that is there now. You can't pretend to tell them like, hey, that's it's not an addiction, or get into that whole conversation. It doesn't really matter, because in their eyes it's something that's affecting their relationship, something that's affecting their body, something that's affecting their mind. It's, to them, it's real. And that's kind of like you were saying, I think, where we start in a similar way. In some ways it doesn't matter whether you feel like it's an addiction or not. The person feels that they have an issue with it.
Right. Right. If it's a problem, then and they identify that as their presenting problem, then we're going to help them with that.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it really does not matter to me what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the client says I have a pornography addiction, or whether they say I have a problem with pornography. I'm getting more of those now. They just say I have a problem with pornography.
Mm-hmm.
Or clients don't usually, to me, use the word. I mean, we use the word compulsive around each other, but clients don't say I have a compulsive porn problem. And so it doesn't matter to me. If I say, why are you here? And they say porn, then we go forward with that.
Right. Right. There's not a debate of like, is this really an addiction or whatever,
Right.
Like, define that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there is define.
They don't, and the clients don't care. Like they're, if we got into this whole debate about this with them, they would just be like, I don't care, help me.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it doesn't matter to them, this controversy.
Definitely. Right. So when we first get people in, someone comes in, like you said, I have a porn problem. What are some things, and I can answer as well, but I feel like as a springboard, what are some things we start off with? So there's the things we look at, start discussing with them as far as porn as an issue. Like, how do we know that they truly are struggling with that, I guess is the question.
Some questions that I ask them is like, talk to me about times where you've tried to quit and you've not been able to quit. Because it's people think that if someone has an addiction or a compulsion, or a problem giving up something, they think that they can't quit. And so really people are experts at quitting. They quit every day.
Right.
Right. Every time they use porn, it's the last time they're ever going to use, until the next time they use. And so they keep quitting. Right. And so talk to me about those times where you've tried to quit and you've not been able to. I also ask them to talk to me about like inappropriate times and places where they've used porn. And there are inappropriate times and places. And again, sometimes they access porn at work. And I can't think of a job that would like you to access porn at work and masturbate.
Right.
And so
while driving is another
right,
one that
that's
I've had.
another one that I get to. And so they, people get in trouble for that. Like, especially if you're using a work device to access porn. And there are news stories. There was a gentleman killed. He was in his 50s. He was partially ejected from his car, and he died just 20 miles from where we're sitting. And the police found porn playing on his phone. He rolled over. His car rolled over. It was horrible story, but so people do unfortunately look at porn while they're driving, and are masturbating to that. Church is another place that I've heard, and so just asking clients, talk to me about inappropriate times and places, right?
Right.
Sometimes at home when you're supposed to be watching the kids, that's happened as well. And unfortunately, sometimes kids walk in when you're doing that, and so that's a problem.
Right, and is it not technically illegal? Right, it's
Yep, that's a reportable.
As if you're showing them, is reportable at least, right? As a counselor, is reportable to us if your child sees pornography, or if you're kind of showing them, not
right
in some ways.
Yep.
Right, and I mean, this isn't, I'm assuming, at least the way when I would ask it, it's not necessarily in a shaming sense of like, how could you be like watching pornography while you're driving or whatever. It's I mean, in my mind, it's one is like, okay, to what severity are you struggling with this? Clearly, this is to a different, not different level, but an intense level when you're putting yourself into risky situations, and also, as an exploration of like, how do you feel about that? Like, do you like the fact that it's kind of dangerous, or it's kind of like in these situations that could get you in trouble?
Yep.
Are you okay with that?
That's what I say. Are you okay with that?
Right.
And so that's an important point to like. We don't judge people. I've had people tell me some pretty scary things, some pretty uncommon, problematic stuff for them. And I don't judge them. It's not my place. I tell them you don't pay me to judge you. And so I don't judge them. I just try to. I'm asking them those questions to figure out how big of a problem it is for them, and how they feel about themselves having done these things that are problems for them, right? And so, because shame, and we've talked about shame in other podcasts, but like shame is such a big feeder for out of control behavior. Like shame makes it worse. It's food, right? It's makes your addiction stronger. It makes your compulsion stronger. And so, so those are some questions that I ask them. Like, another question is like, have you ever like not done family or social activities to be able to stay home and look at porn, right? Like skipped your cousin's birthday party, or skipped going to the new Marvel movie that's
right.
Have you
the
skipped
next
going
Marvel movie.
yeah
One
right
of them.
have you skipped that, going out with your friends to stay home and look at porn? Another way that shows up is picking a fight with your significant other, so that then they leave so that you can be home alone to look at porn.
Right.
I hear stories like that where, well, I wanted to look at porn, and so I had to pick a fight with her so she'd leave.
And even you have both sides of that. The picking the fight part. I feel like there's the, guys will say kind of consciously do that in the sense of like, okay, I know she's gonna leave because when I pick a fight or whatever, this is gonna happen. But then there's even the second layer of people that subconsciously do that. They don't think outwardly like, oh, I'm gonna like pick a fight to have her leave so I can watch porn. But in so many steps, they're doing it kind of in that way, and that's hard to recognize, I think, but it's a good question to ask of what have you done to facilitate you watching porn, either consciously or subconsciously,
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of times we do things without realizing the whole reasoning behind why we're doing it. And that certainly the same applies for people who consume pornography. They're doing things and they don't realize consciously the ramifications of that, but they're still setting situations up so that they can look at porn.
Right. Much like any other addictive type, compulsive type behaviors.
Right.
Yeah, and I was just talking about this with a client too, this idea of, and we can, maybe expand your thoughts about that too, but this idea of I guess we talk about it in the sense of the porn brain versus the logical brain. On the logical side, we ask our clients, like, oh, did you purposefully kick your significant other out or fight to get her out? Like, all right, cool. To watch porn? Like, no, not necessarily. But your porn brain was in effect of like, how can I get to porn?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How can I, logically it doesn't make sense, but your porn brain kicked up and was like, okay, here's the fastest way. I'm going to start a fight, or I'm going to stay home from an event, or whatever's the fastest, easiest way to get you to use porn,
Right. And that the porn brain shows up in other ways as well. Like, sometimes a client will, they may be having problems with their significant other. And so they feel emotionally cut off from that person. And so then they look at porn as this like false sense of intimacy, because their porn brain tells them, I don't care how I get a connection as long as I have a connection with somebody. And so that's their porn brain talking, right? But they know that this connection that they have is fake, that it's not a real connection. These porn actors don't care about you. But they pretend like they do, right? And so it feels to the brain like they do, like they care about you. So that's another example of how the porn brain talks to you. And it's really easy for some reason for us to believe the lies that porn tells us, right? That because your porn brain will say, oh, that's a connection, that's what you need, do that and you'll feel better. But then we do it and then we don't feel better.
Feel worse.
Right. We might feel better for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, but then we don't feel better, right? And we don't feel better for much longer than what we do feel better. And so, but that's the porn brain, right? And the porn brain gives us like this amnesia, right? Because we don't remember that we feel worse. We only remember that we're going to feel better. Right. So we don't remember the consequences. We don't remember the damage that we caused the relationships. But we do remember that this is relief. It relieves stress. It relieves boredom. It relieves whatever. Yeah. So the porn brain tells us that this is the answer.
Yeah. Why do you think it's so hard for our guys so easy to believe the lies that the porn brain is telling them or us or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that part of it is that like short term versus long term. I think that in the short term, your porn brain is telling the truth, because for the next 20 minutes you are going to feel better. You are going to feel this it is a fake sense of connection, but you are going to feel a sense of connection to these people. Porn is manufactured so you feel connected to these people. They did it on purpose. And so I think that, like I said, it's a short-term versus long-term thing. Like in the long term, this is going to be detrimental to our relationship. If even the only thing was that you're expending your sexual energy on porn rather than with your partner, right? And so even if we took that one thing, that's a problem for relationships, for many relationships. There are relationships where consumption of porn by one or the other or both of them is agreed upon and it's acceptable, and we're not talking about those people.
Right. Those people don't come into our office.
Right. Yeah, they don't ask us for help, and that's fine. And we're not out on the street grabbing people by the hair or the head and saying, "No, you have a problem."
Right.
We only help the people that come to us for help, and so they forget. The long term is kind of put on pause in exchange for the short term reward. And and the example that I always use with people, because they can kind of relate to that, a lot of people can, is, every January 1st, people, it's popular now not to make New Year's resolutions, but people still make New Year's resolutions. They just don't tell people that they do. And so, they might say, oh, I want to lose weight, or I want to eat healthier this year. Well, and that lasts until you go back to work and somebody brings donuts, right? Mm-hmm. And so, were you lying that you wanted to eat healthier? No, you still want to eat healthier, but that's a long-term goal. The short-term goal is eating that yummy Long John in front of me with chocolate frosting, right?
So good.
And so we push pause on the long-term goal in exchange for the short-term reward, right? And I think that that's why it's so easy to believe the porn brain, right? Because to me, I always talk to clients about, you pressed mute on the healthy brain, right? Like you muted that like a remote. You literally shut the sound off on that part of your brain that said, this is not a good idea. This is going to damage our relationship. It even hurts me, regardless of my partner. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm trying to stop, and I'm doing something that I don't want to do again, right? And so it hurts me too. So we just turn the volume way down on that voice, but then the other one is louder now, because the healthy voice is quiet, and so that makes the unhealthy voice, the porn brain, louder. So I think that's why it's easy to believe.
Mm-hmm. And so much of, or so many times of muting that healthy voice and increasing that porn voice results in just, at some points probably not hearing the healthy brain at times, or
Yep.
Or it's just, it becomes automatic of like, okay, this is what it is, or and it's just second nature now to do those things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it becomes very easy to mute the healthy brain, because anything that we practice, you're going to get better at. So if you practice muting that healthy voice all the time, you're going to get really good at it. And so I literally say to my clients, you need to practice listening to that healthy voice and practice muting the porn brain, right? Because you can do that. And so an example of that is, clients they're starting to practice some of the things that I tell them, and then they come back and they tell me, oh, I was alone this weekend, my significant other was off shopping or whatever, and I had the opportunity to look. And so sometimes they'll say, I even started scrolling on Instagram, or I started doing whatever the beginnings of it is, right? And I call that like drive-by porn, right?
Right.
Because they're starting to kind of go down. It's not real porn, but they're starting to move that direction.
Gateway porn, maybe.
Yeah. and then they come to, in other words, their healthy brains started to yell at them or whatever. And they're like, what am I doing? I don't want to do this anymore. Right. And so they stop themselves, and they mute the porn brain more, and then they increase the volume of the healthy brain, and then they go do something healthy. They go for a walk, or they go play basketball, or they do whatever their replacement activities are. And then it helps to kind of shift that balance back towards the healthy brain. And I want to throw in here, because when I talk to my clients about this, they always get the confused look on their face, and they're like, well, am I schizophrenic or something? Like, do I have multiple personalities? And I'm like, no. Like, we all have these these kind of parts to ourselves. Again, I use a lot of food examples.
Mm-hmm. That's the best kind of examples, in my opinion,
right.
at least.
And so, you know, if I said, hey, let's go out to eat after this, where do you want to go? And you would say, well, part of me wants Italian food, you know, that it's all about the pasta, but part of me wants Mexican food, right? Mm-hmm. So we're used to having two parts of our brain when it comes to food, or even like family vacations or whatever. You know, part of me wants to go to Disney World, but part of me wants to go see the mountains out west. Like, and we don't think we have multiple personalities when we talk about that, but somehow people get a little scared when I start talking about porn brain and healthy brain, and sometimes that freaks them out a little bit.
Right.
I'm like, no, we all have We all have different voices in our heads about different things. Even
Right.
television shows or movies, right? Part of me wants to watch this, part of me wants to watch this. It's the same thing.
Right. And also the same mechanism, talking about the shutting off the healthy brain, it makes me think about my daughter right now. She's 4 and she's all about, her reasoning brain shuts off a lot these days, where then just burst of emotion, and nothing, not nothing, but most things aren't gonna calm her down until she gets past that, the flipping the lid, if you will. I forget who uses that term, but once that part of the brain is shut off, quote unquote, we have it as children and as adults. When someone cuts you off in traffic and you're like, I'm doing this, I'm gonna cut them back off, and you realize like, oh man, that probably was like a dumb thing to do. I shouldn't have done that. It's that part of it is that mechanism as well, where you're shutting off the frontal lobe of your brain. It's not necessarily you're turning into a different person. It feels like it at times, both in all of these scenarios, like whether it's with anger, whether it's with porn, whatever, it feels like two different people, but it's that same mechanism too, I think, And I also, the thought of that uphill battle that our guys are going through. One, it's the mechanism happening in the brain, and then 2 is just how close it is to reality, quote unquote. Like you said, there's like some truth in what your brain is telling you. Like, yeah, you're gonna have some sort of connection. You're gonna have, the example that came to mind is like a pyramid scheme. Like,
Yeah.
if you can earn this free car,
Yeah.
like, it's possible. But like, what are the steps that you have to do to actually earn the free car? You know what I mean?
What's it gonna cost me?
What's it gonna cost you? Like, sure, you can get that feeling of connection. You can get that feeling of affirmation. Some guys will talk about. You can get that feeling of recharge, quote unquote, for 10 seconds, for 5 minutes. In the long run, though, you're not really getting anything. It's just you're worse off.
Right.
Right.
And I think it's Dr. Siegel that talks about the
Flipping the lid. Okay, yeah.
I think it's Siegel.
That sounds right.
So if they Google flipping the lid with Siegel, he talks about it takes your frontal lobe offline, which is the part that deals with impulse control, emotion regulation, all that kind of stuff. When we get stressed, the frontal lobe goes offline, certainly in arguments with our significant other. That's why many times when we're fighting with our significant other, we'll say things, sometimes even do things that we don't want to say or do, but it's because our frontal lobe is offline, right? And we need to, and that's something that we work with clients on, is techniques to bring that back online, right? And it's just a matter of seconds sometimes. Sometimes a couple of minutes before somebody can bring that back online. And sometimes walking away, but giving the other person, I can't talk about this right now, but I'll be back in 10 minutes and I'll be able to talk about this. Because then they know that that's when their frontal lobe is going to be back online. And you can like reasonably discuss things like an adult rather than throwing a fit like a 4-year-old. But we all have that 4-year-old, right? We all have that ability to throw a fit.
Definitely. Yeah. So obviously still porn related, but kind of merging into, so the question is porn sex real sex? What are your thoughts?
Oh my! This is a long conversation. It is,
and we'll be expanding on another episode. So stay tuned for that one.
So porn sex is not real sex. I always try to wonder about what people are thinking when I say that. Like when they're filming people having sex and that's porn, that is real sex, that they're having sex.
Right. They're really having sex.
Yes, they're really having sex for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week often, which is a lot of friction, by the way. And so often under the influence of drugs or alcohol, because that's a lot of sex. And so that's a hard industry, pun intended,
Wow.
to engage in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a lot of friction. And so anyway, is it realistic? I think is what you're asking.
Yep.
And it is not realistic by any stretch of the imagination. The average penis size in porn is about 2 inches longer, and girth-wise as well, is much bigger than the average penis size in real life, in not porn life. And so, and also, I mean, that's just one stat. I could, go on for the next hour about the difference in stats. Breast size for women, even foot size for whatever reason.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah.
Larger feet.
Yep, larger feet.
Huh.
And so taller too. And so it's these are actors, right? These are people who have been hired because of their physical attributes, like all actors, right? So they don't hire people that look like me to play Batman, right, on TV.
They should.
Right? And so just like Hollywood movies, the actors are hired because of their attributes. And so in porn, they're hired for specific attributes that they have. And so it's not realistic sex, right? They show things in porn that mainstream people, and I'm not talking like a political party or whatever, right? It's that normal people, when they have sex, don't do these things, right? For example, like ejaculating on a woman's face. When we survey women, most women do not want that to be part of sex. But if you see that over and over and over in porn, you're going to think that they do want that, right? And so
rough sex, another one,
right? And so what happens is people see this over and over and over again in porn, and then they don't ask their partner, right? If your partner wants you to ejaculate on their face, that's great, right? But what happens is there's no conversation, there's no asking, they just do it, and to me that's almost assault-like. If you do that without asking your partner if that's okay, then now you're doing something sexually to this person that they did not give you permission to do, and so porn tends to cut down on sexual conversation among couples, right? There's no, hey, do you want to try this? Do you want to try this position? Do you want to do this? Do you want me to do this to you while you do this to me? It cuts down on that conversation because porn has normalized that, because you've seen it 1,000 times in the porn that you've watched, and that becomes normal to you, and you think everybody's doing it this way, when in reality everyone's not doing it that way. But if you and your partner agree, that's fine.
Right.
So there's a lot of unrealistic aspects to porn. It's very seldom in porn for someone to ask for permission to have sex, and even when they switch activities, there tends to not be permission asked for when we switch activities. When we go from kissing and hugging to penetrative sex, there's no permission asked there. And also with porn, if there's any kind of slapping, hair pulling, stuff like that we call that hardcore porn, again, those types of activities are normalized as well, right? And it can be a little surprising to your partner for that to happen, when you've not agreed ahead of time that that's going to be part of your sexual repertoire. So there's a lot of unrealistic aspects to sex. The porn industry, I've seen several documentaries where porn actors are interviewed, and they'll say, we are not teachers. That is not our role. Porn is entertainment, and that's it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But unfortunately, a lot of young people are learning how to have sex by watching porn. And I always say to people, that's like learning how to drive by watching Grand Theft Auto or something, right? Like it's
Right.
like you're using something designed for entertainment. And when we use the word entertainment, you should read exaggeration there, right?
Right.
Because when anything's made for entertainment, there's going to be exaggeration. And so then you're learning how to do something by seeing it exaggerated, right? And that's not really the right way to do stuff.
Right. It's not realistic.
Right. It's not realistic. And so you're learning unrealistic sex by watching porn. In the porn industry, like I said, they say we're not supposed to be teachers.
Mm-hmm.
We're in this to entertain. That's why porn is for adults, because the assumption is you, as an adult, you already have some sort of sexual template, so that you can be like, oh yeah, this is exaggeration. Like real people don't do this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But as as a child, when they look at porn, they don't have that template to say, oh, this is unrealistic. They think everybody's doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that assumes that that you're getting that sexual template. I mean, the thing that I always talk about, is like you said, there's relationships where porn is used and accepted, and that's totally fine. And porn as an industry, like in my opinion, I'm not attacking porn as an industry. The issue for me is like the porn literacy or the sexual education, like you said, the template that you have as a child going into adulthood of what's healthy sexuality, what's healthy sexuality for me, what's realistic and what's not realistic. I think that's the huge missing piece of like the guys that come into our office of like, no one ever talked to them about sex. No one ever talked to them about what regular, not typical sex looks like. Like that's not part of the conversation. So then, of course, you're learning from porn. It's like using that analogy you had is like watching basketball and see LeBron James doing a dunk and be like, oh, I can do that. Like,
Yeah.
No, this is the 1% of people,
Right.
that with these physical attributes. In the case of basketball, it's the tallest people around in the U.S. In the case of porn, it's the people with the biggest penises and whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
It's not realistic. So I think the missing link is that sex education piece or that porn literacy piece. Like, you can't go to the WWE and jump off of the turnbuckle onto the ring just by by watching it, because you've watched a lot of wrestling. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. But we're programmed to think that we can.
Right.
Like by watching thousands of hours of porn,
Mm-hmm.
We're programmed to think that that's normal, that that's typical, and everybody's doing it, and that I can do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on another topic that I could talk
Another
about for hours.
episode.
that we need to be talking to people about sex, right? We need to talk to children about sex. What is comfortable touch? What is uncomfortable touch? What you're allowed to do with your body and what you're not allowed to do with your body, and that you have control over your body, right? That because there's like, were you forced to hug your relatives as a child, right? Because then you that's teaching you that you don't have agency over your body, right? That you don't have control over that your body is to be used by other people without your permission, right? And so but also talking about sex and talking about oral sex, and all the kinds of sex, like sexual touching. When we hear sex, we think penetrative sex, right? But there's a lot of other stuff that's kind of around that and involved in that, other than penetrative sex. And so including anal and vaginal sex and oral sex and touching and fondling and all that kind of stuff like that. And so we tend not to, in Midwest American society, we tend not to talk to children about sex. If we do, it's don't do it. That's those 3 words are the whole sex talk. If you're lucky enough to get a sex talk, those 3 words are
Right.
it. And so I think we do a disservice to children because what happens is they Google it and then porn comes up and then they're like, oh, well, this is what's normal, right? Because my parents didn't talk to me about anything. And also, if my parents didn't talk to me about it, in children's minds, that gives them permission to do it, right?
Right. If the rule wasn't set or the don't do it wasn't said, then you can do it, of course.
Right. Right. And I just had a student successfully defend her dissertation, and it was on oral sex. And her whole premise was that what she found out in her research was that because parents are talking to their kids about sex, if they do talk to them, it's about sex. They don't talk to them about oral sex at all. And so then in the people that she surveyed's mind, that she found that they thought that was permission, right? Granted by their parents, because they didn't talk to them about oral sex. So they thought, well, oral sex is on the table then, right? And so I think we need to be explaining porn to our children, right? Like, there's a great book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures.
I was just gonna say that one.
That helps explain porn to very young children, and there's no porn in the book. It's just talking to them about, basically it's saying there's good pictures and bad pictures out there, and if you encounter a bad picture, come and talk to me about it, and I can answer your questions, right? Very open, very non-judgmental attitude. Because again, if your kid comes to you and says, hey, somebody showed me porn at school, which happens, by the way, and you freak out and start screaming at your kid, they'll never talk to you about porn again. They'll never talk to you about sex again, but they'll Google it and then it'll go underground, right? So now it's secret. Because you're not a safe person to talk to them about it. So really what you should do as a parent is answer your kids' questions, but also start the conversation so that they can feel free to come to you and talk to you about it. And it's going to be an ongoing thing. Like, this isn't going to be a one and done thing. As they grow, they're going to have other questions, right? That you need to be able to answer as a parent. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but so is other things, right? So are the ramifications and consequences of not talking to your kids about sex, right? And you can all use your imaginations on what I'm talking about there. But I mean, not the least of which is having to send your 14, 15-year-old son to us because nobody ever talked to them about sex, and now they're looking at porn every day. And so that's one of the unintended consequences of not talking to kids about sex, because they're just going to Google it. We live in a society of Google, and when you Google anything that has anything to do with sex, and sometimes not anything to do with sex, porn comes up.
Yeah, exactly. It leads you to porn,
and then they're in it, and then it's too late. Well, sort of.
Theoretically.
Theoretically,
yeah. It's more difficult.
Yes, that's a better way to say it.
Well, and I think that's definitely going to be another podcast episode about talking to children about sex, because especially now with this whole debate about like schools putting, LGBTQ topics and or sex topics in schools, and parents saying, I want to control what my kid learns. My thing is, like, if you don't have the proper tools / language to talk about it, then you're not going to talk about it, and or you probably shouldn't. Maybe you should leave it to the schools. I mean, that's a whole nother thing that we'll talk about. But because as a society, we don't have the tools, and we don't talk about it in general. So how do you expect your kid to learn if you're not giving the proper tools?
Right.
But
right. I have no problem with people saying, I want to control what my kid learns.
Same.
If you are actually teaching your kid.
Exactly.
Right. About sex. Right. That's what we're talking about today,
yes.
sex and porn. So if you're talking to your kid about porn, I have no problem with you controlling what your kid knows about porn. But the problem is the vast majority of people don't talk to their kids about porn.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they're exposed to porn, and then they keep that secret from their parents because their parents never talked to them about it, so it must be wrong. And so there's no conversations ever had about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not going to do it, who's going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it leaves it to us to do it.
Right.
Right? For when they come to us and have therapy.
Right.
You know,
right. When it's a problem.
Right. And,
sure.
and our clients have ranged. I mean, I've had clients as young as 6 and as old as probably 76,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, and still, even the 76-year-olds, nobody ever talked to them about porn. Nobody talked to them about sex. So they're just doing this all on their own in secret. And so it just lends itself to a lot of problems,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it needs to be an ongoing conversation. Not daily, but certainly more than once,
Mm-hmm.
right? It needs to, and if you make yourself open as a parent to your child talking to you, they will come and they will ask you questions, right? And like I said earlier, yes, it's awkward, but so is it awkward that when you find out your kid needs therapy because of their sexual
Mm-hmm.
Behavior, right?
Right.
So that's, if you want to talk about awkward,
Mm-hmm.
that's an awkward
an
conversation to have with
awkward-
your kid, right? So wouldn't it be better to have these little awkward conversations before it leads to that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Definitely. For sure. Again, we'll. I think we should expand on that one, the children and sex. Talking to children about sex. That sounded weird. No sex with children. We'll definitely expand on that. But as we kind of wrap up this episode, there's clearly not enough time. But what are some quick and dirty kind of tips? One of the two guys, watching this podcast are guys with porn issues. For me, the thought that comes to mind is like connection, like because the secrecy and shame of dealing with pornography. I think it's important to have accountability person. It's important to have trusted people in your corner to kind of bounce it off of, or to talk about it, or to talk about your feelings, whether that's your significant other, and having people that you can be open with, because I think connection is the antidote to secrecy and shame. But what any other quick and dirty kind of tips?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, right? Communication. You said connection, but I would add to that communication, right? Like if you find somebody that you can talk to about these things, and get the right answers, because porn's not going to give you the right answers. They're going to give you the answers that sell stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people listen to this, they're going to be like, porn's free. It is, but it's not. Right? Porn leads you to even OnlyFans, like anything that's going to sell, right? And even the free sites have ads, right? Which is not free. And so they're gonna lead you into paying for premium sites or whatever. So anyway, I think communicating with your partner, communicating with a trusted person about what is okay for me and what is not okay for me, and how do I decide what's okay for me to do as far as porn or sex or whatever. And what's okay for me at this stage of my life and what's not okay for me at this stage of my life. I really think communication and connection are the antidotes to a lot of this behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with that communication, I think that's key as well too. Like when we're talking about the porn brain and the logical brain, I think having someone that you can connect with, because oftentimes I feel like guys talk about like you can't trust yourself sometimes, especially in that dichotomy of the porn brain versus the logical brain, and sometimes the thoughts that you're having or whatever, you're like, I can't trust what's normal and what's typical or whatever, so I think having someone, definitely having someone maybe that's in the struggle with you, if you will, but also having someone that maybe it's not struggling with it, to bounce that off of, like, is this normal? Is this thought okay? Is this whatever that is? You know what I mean? That's, I think, important as well, in that communication. Because you alone with your brain sometimes it's not the best recipe for success. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. So just asking, like you said, asking somebody, talking about it, because really we don't talk about it because we want people to think that we're perfect and we have it all together. But we really don't. And then that's what brings people to us, right? Because they, and I think that that's one of the reasons why we have so many people in this tiny town coming to us, because this is a place where they can talk about it, and they don't get judgment, and they get somebody that's going to listen, and they get somebody that's going to say, but is that really what you want? And if it is, that's fine. And if it's not, then let's do something else to get you what you want. Right, that's not in the category of behaviors that I don't want to do anymore, and so, people do the exact opposite of what they should do. They keep all this a secret. They let their own brain kind of run rampant because there's nobody to hold them accountable, and so we really should be talking to our partners about our sexual struggles, not keeping a secret.
Definitely. Cool. Thanks for the info. Again, we're going to be jumping off of here into other podcasts, but I think it was a good start, and some good info. Obviously, for people listening, they can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Wet Dreams Podcast, Dreams with a Z, and anywhere that podcasts are available. And we also have the video on YouTube just as an accompaniment to. And if you guys want to see our beards, they're pretty they're pretty voluminous. I don't know what the word is, but and we'd love to answer any questions that people have. I think there's a lot. Again, like you said, it's people want a space to talk about it, and we just hope that this is a small space that people can listen and talk about it with us.
Yep, exactly,
for sure. Awesome.
Thanks.
Here's just a tip. Is pornography the problem for you? Here are some common signs that it might be a problem in your life. Number 1, you're beginning to ignore other responsibilities or tasks at work, school, or home in order to watch it. 2, you start engaging in what might be considered riskier behavior, like watching porn while driving. 3, you need more extreme forms of it, or you need it more frequently to get the same effect. 4, you feel like even though you want to stop watching it, you can't, or you've tried to stop and can't seem to. 5, you're using it to cope with anxiety, depression, feelings of sadness, etc. 6, you're spending excessive amounts of money on it. 7, you've lost interest in real life sex. 8, you're feeling guilty, distracted, angry about your use. If you feel any of these apply to you, that's okay. There's help out there like online resources, Reddit forums, therapists, etc. Reach out to someone you trust. Liking what you're hearing so far? Feel free to give us a follow at our socials down below and get some more info on sex therapy related topics.